Welcome to Listen by Gene Ginsberg. This audio experience and podcast is all about social media, digital marketing, entrepreneurship, and interviews with top entrepreneurs in the digital and social space. I am your host, Gene Ginsberg, digital marketing expert, #1 best-selling author, and award-winning entrepreneur. I will be sharing with you strategies, tips, and tactics on how to grow your business and your social media following. Thanks for listening. Hey everyone, Gene Ginsberg here, and welcome to the podcast. I am super excited today. I have a very special guest, and I can't wait to get into all the details. We're going to talk about UX UI, right? User experience.
User experience.
User experience. Awesome. I'm super excited. Go ahead, please introduce yourself, and we'll jump right in.
Well, thanks for having me on your show. I'm John Fukuda, and I'm a co-founder at Limina. And Limina is a user experience research strategy and design consultancy. We specialize in business process management systems for enterprise organizations. And today, what I want to talk to you about is a report that we released on June 1st, our 2020 design integration report.
Great. We'll get right into that. But I think before we talk about the report, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about your background and your company?
Sure. So my background is I started in software design as a systems integration consultant at Cambridge Technology Partners. And at that time, it was right around the cusp of the dot-com boom. So everybody was migrating their brick and mortars to online. So this is about 20 years ago, by the way. And my team and I were essentially tasked with translating business requirements into workflows that made sense for technologists to build systems and build workflows on the internet. And that team generally became known as the user experience team. And that was a team that was a phrase that was just starting to come around about 20 years ago. Nielsen Norman and a couple of other guys had thrown that term out there, information architects and user experience. So we branded as user experience consultants within Cambridge Technology Partners, and then we wrote a lot of methodology for that. So with that background, and just a few years later with the dot-com bust, I was furloughed with a couple of other consultants, and we ended up extending our relationships with some of the customers we were already working with. And as separate consultants, we were giving them 3 different invoices every month, and they said, hey, it'd be better if you guys just formed a company. And so we, using all the methodology that we had written already for systems integration and user experience work, we just built a practice around that. And that's what Limina is today.
Great. Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing. So tell us a little bit about the company, like what kind of clients do you work with? What are specifically the challenges that you solve for them?
Okay. Yeah, so we generally have like 3 categories of customers. Our primary customers are enterprise businesses. These are organizations that are implementing a lot of different technologies. They're standing up essentially business process management systems for you name it, whether it's like HR, knowledge management, practice management, whatever it is. They're building intranets and all types of business process workflows. So we help them to better understand the needs of their employees and how could the systems be built better for efficiency, quality, risk reduction, and better employee happiness overall. And then the other category of customers we have is startups. These are people who they have really great ideas. They even maybe have like patented IP around the specific business problem their solutions out there for, but they're having trouble connecting their product solution to the needs of end users in the ways that users want them. So generally when you're a startup and you have this great idea, you've thought about it from the creator standpoint and from the solution standpoint, and much less from this is what I need as a human being, and oh, that solution actually meets my needs. So it's basically just getting them to bend their thinking back towards a user-centered perspective. And
Wow.
then
Okay.
we help them design, what does that experience feel like? And then the last category of customers we work with is the federal government. We have done a lot of, the federal government is in a point of transition where they use the internet initially to communicate their policy. I'm an agency X and our policies and regulatory, world is this, and here's what that means for you as a citizen. That was the Web 1 for government. And Web 2.0 was, starting to build workflows in there. Where we're at right now is what's called digital transformation and eGov delivery. So this is no longer just communicating policy, but actually enabling their services to be web serviced, so that you can log in to the IRS, you can submit things electronically. So the sort of new world of digital transformation is still happening at the government level. So.
Oh, I'm sure. Yes. The government seems to be always a few steps behind, right?
Yeah,
So,
and they're beasts too. I mean, when you talk about a huge mix of technology over 30 years of systems integration and all different types of contractors getting in there with their favorite tools. So it's always a big rat's nest when you get in there, and a lot of work has to go into it.
Right. Absolutely. That makes sense. Well, yeah, thank you for sharing that. So we kind of have a baseline of where we're moving forward with in terms of, what your background is and your company's all about. So you mentioned this report that came out recently. So what is the significance of this report?
Sure. Yeah. So we've been running the business. Limina's coming up on 17 years of practice now. And we found that a lot of the types of problems we go in to solve have a pattern to it. And this is not unique to Limina. I think everyone who does user experience work has to go through this period of understanding, then mapping and planning, and then scoping, and then designing and implementing and testing. So those are like big categories of activities that our group does. And with every customer we go into, we found that we were in the same conversation over and over again. Like, this is what design is, this is how the process works, and this is how you get from not knowing what you're going to build to knowing exactly what you're going to build and how much it's going to cost. So all the things that we do as a practice to marshal a customer through that experience feels like a process of education every time we do it. We wanted to get to the bottom of why do people have so many different notions of what design is and how it should be executed. And so the study was framed up in mid-2019. We came to about 218 questions trying to get to the root of what do people think human-centered design is at digital service and digital product companies, and how well are they orchestrating that as an internal practice of their own. So the objective for us was to see how far off the mark are either we as a company or are other organizations from each other when it comes to normalizing on what human-centered design is and how it should be practiced. And so we took that survey and we put it out in a double-blind study to 100 different organizations. We had 111 responses, actually. And then in addition to that, we had qualitative interviews just to verify what we were finding. These were organizations that we had seen and had knowledge of them actually being best practice leaders in design integration.
This podcast is brought to you by the Digital Marketing Method monthly group coaching program, your methodology for growing your business and your social media following. Join me and my group of supportive entrepreneurs and learn how you can grow your business and your social media following, where we cover topics such as Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, email marketing, and so much more. Go to dmgroup.online, dmgroup.online.
So with those two sets of information, we went through analysis of the survey findings and we generated a report which largely talks about what's happening and what should be happening in design integration. So The report itself we put it out on our website, so it's free to download. And I'll share a URL, I guess, some other time in this talk. But what I'm doing now is I'm going out and finding either business communities that are in the digital product or service space that are interested in learning more about how to integrate design more efficiently and effectively in their organizations.
Sorry, so one question. So what was the findings of the report? Sorry, before we jump into the other stuff, like what is the findings that you found? Like what was important
so basically,
about it?
what we found was 15% of organizations are they are aligned on business, technical, and design functions within their organizations. So where they have that leaves about 85% that are generally needing to catch up. And so when I break an organization into business, technology, and design, where there's great alignment in most organizations is between their technology and business functions. And that's something that I was referring to earlier about systems integration and all the work that's been done to support business processes. That's all great. But there's a ton of technology out there that functionally is appropriate. But from a design perspective and thinking about what is the user's needs in that whole scenario, have a ton of deficiencies. And that's generally like what means job security for my company, right? And a lot of other user experience companies are consistently called in to solve, here's all the usability problems we have at our organization. So what that is a signal of misalignment between design, business, and technology. And that's the other 85%. So the things that work against that, and what we found in our study, is that the organizations that are doing this well are aligning their organization on a couple of things. So a design-centered, human-centered design culture is one of the key, it's like the linchpin of this all. And basically that's organizations understanding that design is not something that you do, that you hire as a role. You don't hire a graphic designer and that's your design department. You actually need to think of design as a process. And if the process involves all the disciplines from across the organization to better understand the marketplace, to better understand the needs of the users within the context of that marketplace, and then to do some problem solving as a collective to drive innovation and product solutioning, that's starting to build a human-centered design culture within the organization. They do that through shared language, shared business processes, shared systems, shared language. And then they do this cross-functionally with shared budgets and shared systems. And then from a metric standpoint, they look at those things. How are our KPIs performing, with that new feature released in the marketplace? And then as a collective, what's our KPIs against how we managed to take that problem and solve it? So what are all the things we did internally and how well did we do that? The companies that are doing well, that 15%, are across the board aligned when it comes to having a human-centered design culture, using cross-functional teams to perform design process, and then measuring their success as a total, as a collective.
So and who is this applicable for? Is this applicable for any company, like one person, solopreneur, to 10 people, to 100 people, to 1,000 people?
It's true. I think as you look at organizations that have been around for a while, right? So we're talking 20 years or so, maybe more. Those organizations have gone through this cycle of adopting a lot of different technologies and having they even might be growing through acquisitions, so that lots of different systems that they're trying to coalesce. They struggle the most with this problem. And then smaller companies, and the ones that we saw were largely in that 15%, were smaller because they have less of that legacy to have to deal with. They're more nimble and can move more quickly. I don't think this is a terribly applicable set of messages for somebody who's like a solopreneur, but there is some things that can be learned from the way you think about design across the board. As a solo practitioner, if let's say you have your own software that you've put out in the marketplace, maybe it's a mobile app or something, having this mindset of scalable, sustainable design integration is still something that will come in handy. It's just the message itself applies, I think, to more of a cross-functional set of practitioners.
Right. So this podcast, I would say most of the listeners here are, solopreneurs or people who want to start a business, or maybe who have a small business, maybe few employees, 10 employees or something along those lines. So how would this be applicable to entrepreneurs? So maybe if you could provide some examples or some key takeaways, because I want to make sure I'm giving value to the individuals who are listening to this. What are some key takeaways they can take away after listening to you on this podcast?
So in addition to breaking down what we saw to be the problems in digital product and service companies, we also saw 7 traits that lent themselves to, sorry, I'm just looking for the page where we break it all down. 6 best practices, essentially. So the first best practice is to make sure that the leadership team understands what design is as a process, from the moment you're trying to understand the market and the users within that market space and what their needs are, and how to articulate those needs into a set of solutions for your product, and how you let that understanding drive innovation in your product solution. So that's one piece. We found that teams that didn't have the support of their leadership, or the leadership wasn't really on board with design as a process and human-centeredness as a means to drive innovation, was those teams, the design leaders find themselves hitting a brick wall at times, and they're not able to get fully execute against what they're learning about their users' needs and how you articulate that in the product. So the key was to have leadership support, and then design culture. So making sure that everybody is aligned on what design is as a process, how it works, what are the set of activities and deliverables that build a design process, and who participates. So that's from a cultural standpoint. We also have a best practice around supporting that culture with shared systems, shared processes, and shared artifacts that can be reused and repeated over and over again. So if you have that, you build in this sense of efficiency and workflow, and how do you approach understanding, how do you plan and estimate against that, and how do you deliver and design and implementation. It also sets the guidepost for when you're testing to know whether or not you moved that KPI in the right direction. So if you have all those things sort of seamlessly laid out for you in a set of repeatable processes with reusable artifacts, then you're kind of knowing what you did that actually improved that KPI.
Right. So these are all the 6 steps that you mentioned?
Yes. So these are different parts of the best practice.
Awesome. Well, that's really interesting points, and I think there's a lot of that small businesses, entrepreneurs can take away from what you were discussing today. Because I mean, design is something that we all need, whether you have a small business, whether you're a solopreneur, if you're starting your own business, something to definitely consider, right? Because that needs to be a culture that you want to have moving forward. When you design your own business, you want to have design as an aspect of it. So yeah, thank you for sharing. That was super helpful. How can our listeners get in touch with you? Perhaps your website or an email address, or any way that they'd like to get in touch with you.
Sure. So the company website is limina.co, limina.co, and I'm John Fukuda, so you can hit me at jfukuda@limina.co.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today. This was very helpful. I hope that you guys got some tidbits out of this interview. And yes, design, I believe, is a very important feature of any business, whether you're small or big. So thanks again for being with us, John, and we look forward to having you on the show another time, and maybe you can provide some more details or some more updates on what's been going on in the design world.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.